Hey guys, welcome back to another video from the AP World History Guide. I'm here to cover today how to write each and every topic concerning the three essays you'll be given when taking your AP exam. Okay, so today I'm going to discuss with you what a DBQ is, what consists in the rubric, kind of what you need, and then we're going to practice a little bit. The same thing with the comparative and the CCOT, or the continuity and change over time. I kind of want to give you guys what the rubric is so you see where you need to get the points, what you guys need, like the basic criteria to have into your essays, and where to practice them so you kind of visually see what you need. So, what is a DBQ or document based essay? A DBQ essay is a question based on the number of written documents given to you. So, you must use all the documents and create three groups to answer whatever the question is asked. So later on, I'm going to be mentioning, and I will keep reiterating, that you need to have three groups. Trust me when I say this, three groups is a must. You must be able to analyze or break down the documents and group them to answer the prompt. I suggest, and many of your teachers will be telling you, to use soapstone when analyzing each document. In the documents, you need to be able to figure out who is writing, what their position or credentials are to be saying what they are saying, and whether there is any bias, and whether their viewpoints, um, and based on like what their viewpoints are, can you group them a certain way? So you have your basic core and your expanded core. You want to focus on the basic core and hit all 6 or 7 points before you can even think about getting into expanded core. So basic core includes like 1 point for acceptable thesis. So you also get a point for addressing all the documents and demonstrates understanding of all but one. So you only can kind of screw up on one document, but you need to be using all documents. Okay, you can get 2 points by supporting thesis with appropriate evidence from all but one document. So when you're grouping them, each document needs to be stated within the essay. And if you mess up one, that's fine, just keep going. If you mess up a little bit more than one, that's when you have problems and you can either get 1 point or no point at all. And missing those points, those crucial points, won't allow you to go to expanded core. You also need to analyze the point of view in at least 2 documents. It says at least 2 documents to get a point, but I would tell you to hit it every time you're writing your essay. So in every paragraph, hit point of view. Because if you screw up on one, at least you have the other ones to fall back on. And most teachers are going to be telling their students to have 3 points of views or 4 points of views or how many that they can fit in their paragraphs. Always go above what they say. Don't do the minimum. Go a little bit more so that you have something to fall back on in case you make a mistake and there was a document that you didn't understand. And I'll be going over point of view and additional document later on. Analyze documents by grouping them in 2 or 3 ways depending on the question. Okay, so you know how I just mentioned to group them 3 ways? That is the golden rule of writing a DBQ. They need to be grouped in 3 ways. If you group them in 2 ways and everyone groups them in 3 ways the day of the test, then you are going to be losing that 1 point, that one crucial point that could make the difference of a 7 or an 8 or a 9. So always group them 3 ways because every teacher is telling their students group it in 3 ways. You don't want to be that one guy to have it grouped 2 ways. There's always going to be a third way to group something. And then the last point is to identify and explain the need for one type of appropriate additional document or source. So based on the basic core, you need to hit up all of these 7 points in order to go to expanded core. So like I mentioned, additional document and point of view. Additional document is when you get your sources, right? And you get a source from a king, a queen, a noble, and a merchant, right? And you're looking for another source that could help explain or answer the question. And sometimes people, or a lot of the times, people use another written account. And I did that too, and I would always look for an additional document that was a written account. But you can say for graphs, you can ask for a graph to represent something or a chart or whatever. So an additional document is like that voice that you're missing that would help answer whatever the question is. And point of view is like perspective. You're going to look at one of the documents. You're going to look at one that's pretty biased because that tends to be easier to write a point of view on. and you're gonna write why they're thinking a certain way and why their account fits a certain mold. And if you do the point of view on biased ones, honestly, from my perspective, it's easier to write them because you're not trying to figure out where they're standing. If you find a biased one, you know where they're standing, making it easier to write. Okay, so that's the basic core. Those are the 7 points you need to know. I'll explain the expanded core, but normally you want to get at least 6 or 7 points in the basic core. The expanded core is that you get all 7 points. You cannot go into expanded core without the 7 points. And then they base it on whether your writing was clear, analytical, whether you were very insightful about the documents, whether you used your documents persuasively as evidence, and that's a key thing. Even if you don't get into expanded core, you need to use your documents persuasively and use them as evidence. Do not restate what's in them. Because if you're restating them, basically college board could go back and read them. They don't need you to tell them what's in the documents. They know it. If you're gonna get a document, kind of use it as evidence. Like you cite it. Never copy and paste it. Never kind of like restate it. Restating it would help you. Don't copy and paste what it says. Document 3 says, or document 2 says, that's a no no. That'll drop you down significantly. Like you will not get any points for that. In the expanded core, it also says analyze point of view in most or all documents. You should be doing that in every paragraph. Hit point of view, hit additional documents in every paragraph, just in case. And who knows, if you get them all right, it might help you get into expanded core. So you might get an 8 or a 9 without knowing. They also say bring in relevant outside historical content. Honestly, for the DBQ, you don't need to know much. Just answer the prompt, use the documents given. If you know about the topic, great. If you don't, just use the documents. And explain why additional types of documents or sources are needed. That last one, explain why the additional types of documents are needed. You need to be doing that anyway. You have to. You can't just say, oh, a graph about how many people died in World War II is good, is helpful. That would not really answer the question. You would say a chart about how many deaths of civilians in World War II is helpful because written accounts can be skewered and they might not give the right number. It's something like that. That's kind of what the reasoning behind an additional document needs to sound like. So you can get up to 9 points. Normally, students hit 6 to 7, not really even 7, normally 6, and they jump it up to 8 if they were really good. No one really gets 7. Key tips. And I've said it over, and I want to keep repeating it until it's stuck in your head. Your DBQ must use all of the documents. If you miss one document, you're not going to have a stronger essay and you'll lose points. So you're never going to go into expanded core. Cite the documents. So, for example, in parentheses, you put doc 1. If you don't cite the documents, it looks like you're not using the documents. So then you automatically, basically, you don't get any points. Never paraphrase or copy from the documents. It's child's play. You're an AP. Do not paraphrase. You must have at least 2 to 3 points of views. And like I said before, I'll say it again, I recommend 3 or however many paragraphs you have, stick one in each paragraph. Each grouping must have 2 or more documents. And when you have a grouping means more than one. So put 2 to 3 and have 3 groups. You don't want too many documents in one group. You don't want one group with 4 documents and one group with 2. It's not going to help you, and it'll take up more time from you writing. So if you can get 3, 3, and 3, that's great. That makes it simpler. It's not too much, and you can throw them into your essay. Finally, look at the documents and see what perspective you are missing. That's the additional document. That's what I keep saying. You need to look at what perspective you're missing and try to fill it into the gap. I'm sorry. The best thing about the DBQ essay, and like I said, it's the best thing. You don't need to know anything. Use the documents, don't restate them, and you're good to go. So here's a practice example. Um, the annual Morton County Tigers versus Suffolk Bullfrogs homecoming football game was played Friday night. Due to family commitments, I was unable to attend the game. The game was decided when Lynn Dankenberg caught a touchdown pass on the last play of the game, giving the Tigers a 14-10 victory. Monday morning when I arrived at school, everyone was talking about the catch and the victory. What I wanted to know was, what I wanted to know was what really happened, and how great of a play was this catch. Throughout the day, I spoke to several people in an attempt to obtain the truth. As you read each point of view, ask yourself what is the validity or how valid is each person's point of view and their expertise in the area of high school football. So that expertise thing, you should always pay attention to that not only in this example, but into other sources and other documents you're reading. Okay, so document one's from the wide receiver who caught the winning pass. It says, "Did you see that catch? I mean, it was great. Man, I knew I had it. That D back was nothing. I ran right by him and just reached out and pulled it in. Focus, real focus. We're number one." So you can read the other documents, but I'm going to point it out in this document. And you can try it out with document 2, 3, 4, and 5 later on. Um, that first document that we read, obviously there's bias. He caught the winning pass. You need to read the little information that they give you. Lyle Dankenberg. Okay, you see that area? Read that before you read your document. You can kind of get a feel of the writer. The way he talks, he was so caught up in the emotion of catching that ball that he's supervised. All he's focusing about is how he made such a winning catch, and to him, it's the best catch out there. He's the one that caught the ball, so there's bias there. He's the one that won the game, bias there. So there's this information is skewered. So if you're gonna do a point of view, you do a point of view on document one, and it would be Lyndon Dannenberg um, caught the winning catch. He was the winning wide receiver and helped the team win to victory. Due to this, the validity of the source is not there. He has expertise on the subject about a great pass, but the issue is that he was so caught up in emotion that turns away from whether he was being level-headed when thinking about the greatness of the catch. You see the way I phrased it? That's kind of how you want your additional document and point of view to sound. You kind of have to understand the person that's writing this. So not all of them are going to be as easy as this one. Here, look at document 3. Demetrius Johnson, South Fork defensive back who covered Dankenberg. "We were robbed. That guy never caught the ball. He was lying there on the ground and the ball fell in his hands. He pushed me and the ref never saw nothing. Martin County is nothing but a bunch of cheese." There's bias here. He lost the game. He felt like it was his fault, so automatically he turns the blame onto the other guy. He blames the ref for not seeing anything, and then he calls Martin County a bunch of cheese. Since he lost, uh, his document is biased. He doesn't want to admit anything. Whether he's valid, he's pretty valid in knowing the information because football players, I'm guessing here, this is a general idea, they know the plays and they understand what's going on. But whether he has the credentials to say whether it's a good pass or not, I don't think so. With document 1 and 3, I don't think they have the credentials for saying whether a pass was good or not. Both their emotions were caught up in the game, so one is going to tell you, yeah, the pass was great because we won. And document 3 is going to tell you, no, it wasn't great because I lost it, and the other guy had the ball fall in his hands. So both documents are biased, and that's when you would do point of view. Not all documents, like I said, are going to be easy to point out the bias and which one is valid. But this is like a little example for you to see documents with bias, to point them out and figure them out so that you can then apply that to other documents. Okay, document 5. Owen Dyson, football referee, excerpt from his game report at the Florida High. It was a clean and simple catch, resulting in a touchdown and no penalty was involved. Document 5. He's a football referee. Um, he has credentials, so he knows what he's saying. His little excerpt has no bias. It's not going in favor of one side or another. So this is one of the sources that is great to pay attention to. So you'd be like, oh, this source has no bias. But then now that you look at the documents, you have one from a cheerleader, you have one from a defensive back, wide receiver, a coach, and a referee. You want to look for another source that was missing. Or what voice did you not hear to make sure whether the catch was as great as it seems? What you need to do is you need to always go back to the question, read it a couple of times, and then read the documents. You're going to have, when you start the test, 2 hours and 10 minutes. The 10 minutes is your reading period. You use that to read the documents for the DBQ before anything else. Use that 10 minutes to read all the documents and then start breaking them down, soapstoning them to the best of your ability. So that when the 10 minutes are up, you can start grouping and you can start answering the question, not wasting any time. Okay, so I hope that little example helped. So basically, you want to keep in mind as you're reading each source, are they valid? Do they have a noticeable bias? And what voice is missing? You have to be asking these questions to yourself, or if not, your essay won't be strong. When writing your thesis, it is very important to read and understand the prompt, or you're going to get the question wrong. If you don't understand the prompt, you're going to be writing something different than what is being asked, and you won't be getting any points. So, for example, if I get a prompt that says, using the documents, analyze the social and economic effects of the global flow of silver from the mid 16th century to the 18th century, and explain how another document would help you analyze the effects of the flow of the silver bullion in this period. In that whole little paraphrase there, and that whole little question being asked of you, it looks scary. You're seeing a bunch of words and you don't know what's going on. You want to pay attention when reading, highlight what's being asked. So first off, they're asking us about social and economic effects. So that's something I highlight. They're telling us a time period. Highlight time period so you know where not to get off. Normally in the DBQ, all your documents are in the correct time period, but it's always good to know so that you have a mental picture of what's going on in the world. And here, in this example, they're asking us about the global flow of silver. So that's something else you highlight. Those are you want to highlight what's being asked of you, when's it occurring, and the general idea. So always read the question and then start highlighting the key points you need. So like those certain words, I have them in red because those are the things that you need to have in your essay. So you need to have social and economic effects of the global flow of silver in the mid 16th century to the 18th century. And key fact that you need to know, when I say mid 16th century, I mean like like the middle 1500s, so 1550s and onward. And then when I say 18th century, it's like 1700s. The centuries are a year, like kind of like a year behind. So if I say 21st century, we're in the 2000s. If I say the 20th century, I'm in the 1900s. That's something to pay attention to so you don't get confused when you see 16th or 18th century and you don't know what's going on. Okay, this is an essay format when writing a DBQ. So use this so you can start getting and grabbing every point you need. First, start with your thesis. Keep it short, sweet, to the point, no sugarcoating, don't fluff it. Just answer the question. Then group 1, you need the documents to support your thesis or whatever group you have. You need to hit a point of view and you need the additional document. Same thing for group 2 and group 3. For each paragraph, have the documents, support your thesis, give a good analysis and argument, don't just pull things, and then hit up a point of view and an additional document in each paragraph. And then have the conclusion wrap up the thesis like a restating or like you're regifting your thesis again. Compare and contrast. What is a compare and contrast? Well, it's in the name. You're given topics to choose from, and you are comparing and contrasting one idea from another. Compared to the DBQ, this essay is pretty easy, and honestly, it's one of the easiest ones, in my opinion, but you need to know your history. Okay, so same thing that you're going to notice with every rubric. The rubrics for the DBQ, CCOT, and comparative are the same. You have your basic core, expanded core. You need to hit the 7 points before you get to expanded core. But you normally just want to focus on getting your basic course. You need 1 point for an acceptable thesis. So you mentioned the comparisons and contrasts in your thesis. You can have any number of contrasts, any number of comparisons you want. You could have 2 comparisons, 1 contrast, 2 contrast, 1 comparison. Your call, depending on the question if you know it. Okay, you can get 2 points by addressing all parts of the question, though not necessarily evenly or thoroughly. Try to do it evenly, try to do it thoroughly. Every paragraph should be thorough in depth. So if you're talking about a comparative, about the world trade, talk about it deeply and don't get too out of the subject, but stay on topic. Don't talk about, if I asked you a question about World War One, don't get so far out of depth that you start going into World War Two. Stay on the topic. Okay. You can get 1 point if you address most parts of the question. Like, for example, you deal with differences but not similarities. You need to hit up differences and similarities. You don't want to be that one guy that only mentions similarities and no differences. Or only differences and no similarities. Hit both of them up. You can get 2 points for substantial thesis with appropriate evidence. So your thesis with evidence, they need to be like peanut butter and jelly. So they go together. They can't be separated. You can get 1 point for partial substantial thesis with appropriate evidence. Shoot for two. You need the two. 1 point for making three relevant direct comparisons between or among societies. So it really does depend on the question. So you could get one that deals with societies. Most of the time, you're going to get one that deals with societies, or they're going to deal with themes. But you want to make comparisons between the two and say, oh, if I asked you a question about the spice trade, make comparisons between those involved and those that were like one, those that were receiving, those that were sending. You need to kind of mix both of them together. Like if you're making a sandwich, you can't only put one and not the other. Like in this case, a peanut butter and jelly. You have to have both the peanut butter and the jelly to make it fully complete. I know this doesn't make any sense or it sounds really weird and corny, but picture it. You can't have just half of a sandwich. It just doesn't make any sense and it doesn't taste as good. You want both halves together to make it complete, and that's what they want. They want your thesis and appropriate evidence, and they also want the comparisons and contrasts between other topics. So don't only mention the comparatives and the contrast of one area. Kind of mix them. Get them both together. Get it like a debate. Get them both arguing with each other on what they both share together, what they both see differently. And when I show you an example later, all of this rambling is going to make sense. And finally, analyze at least three reasons for a similarity or difference and identify a direct comparison. So understand why there's differences, understand why there's similarities. And the same thing with the expanded core is the analytical comprehensive thesis that you have a lot of historical evidence. That those extra 2 points is like if you write really well and you're very in depth. That's basically what the 2 points are. Some tips and tricks. Compared to the DBQ, you need to know history. I want to keep saying this over and over again. Your teachers are going to be telling you to. You need to know about the time period. You need to understand the centuries and how they work and mentally picture what's happening. So this is the example I'm talking about. If I gave you a question that says compare and contrast the reasons why the North and South fought the Civil War, if you give this kind of thesis, believe me, you're not getting any points. The North and South fought the Civil War for many reasons, some which were the same and some were different. That's the kind of thesis I expect from really a fourth or fifth grader. You're an AP, you shouldn't have a thesis like that. That's too vague. You're not identifying anything. How are you going to make a group make your comparison and contrast paragraphs if it's so vague that we don't know what you're talking about? This is a working thesis, and this is something that you should be um, kind of working towards. But there's also things that could be added to. While both sides fought the Civil War over the issue of slavery, the North fought for more reasons, while the South fought to preserve its own institutions. It's better, but it's still vague. When it says South fought to preserve its own institutions, kind of expand on that. Like the South fought to protect and keep slavery, and the North fought to keep its factories open for white males. Kind of make those vagueness, like anything too vague, kind of give it more depth. Because if it's too vague, it doesn't help you. And I know that this example I gave you is not something you'll be seeing in AP World. You'll probably see this in AP US. But I kind of wanted you to see how to structure this, how to start getting your thesis into play, how everything needs to be sampled out before you looked at an actual AP World essay. Um, Here's a quick practice one that does deal with AP World. It says analyze the similarities and differences between the role of the state in Japan's economic development and the role of the state in the economic development of one of the following during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So the key things, always read the prompt and highlight what needs to be highlighted. So you're going to highlight the role of the state in Japan's economic development. You're also going to be doing this in one of the other choices, China, Russia, or the Ottoman Empire. And the time period, the late 19th and early 20th century. So the late 1800s, early 1900s. That's the time period you got to look at. And this prompt is the prompt that I had to use. I had to go with in my AP exam. So I had to know the time period, what was happening in that time period, and then what was happening in Japan. And in this case, I chose the Ottoman Empire and what was happening there. So in this question, you can compare Japan's state control in the economy to either China, the Ottoman Empire, or Russia. You need to know what was happening during the late 1800s and early 1900s in Japan and one of the countries of your choice. But like I said, you've got to know what's happening. The DBQ cuts spoon feeds you. This one, you have to know the information. And quick note, later on in the series, I'm going to be bringing back these essay topics that I mentioned so that we can discuss them and then kind of help you answer them. I just wanted to show them to you so you see what they look like, see what key points you need to be paying attention to. But when I get through each lecture that deals with certain topics like this or a theme like this, I'll bring back these essays and we'll answer them together. So you kind of see how you could have answered it because there's multiple ways of answering these questions. But so you get another perspective. The essay format. You have your introduction paragraph, start it up. Then you have your comparison or contrast. I normally suggest three body paragraphs. So you could do two comparisons, one contrast, two contrast, one comparison. But in each one of those, you need to have your first point or what you're going to argue. Then the valid information to back up your point, and then kind of like a little conclusion, mini thesis about that paragraph. So a quick summary of that little paragraph, or that comparison or contrast. Then apply that to your second and third one. You want the first point, so what you're going to argue, information, so the history to back you up, and then just like wrap it up in a little bow. Kind of regurgitate it in a quick sentence or two of what you just discussed. And then you have your conclusion. And my favorite, not really, is the CCOT, or the Continuity and Change Over Time essay, which is described as one of the harder essays compared to the other two, as I mentioned, but don't be worried. Honestly, I found this essay a little harder, but the concept's not too hard. It really does depend on the topic you get. This essay is pretty easy to understand, but if you get a really bad topic or you don't remember that time period, then this is one of the harder ones, and that happened to me. So, like comparative, you need to know your history. Okay. Same thing, basic core, hit 7 points, expanded core, you get all 7 points, you can hit them up for 2 more. That means you have to write really well and be very composed and know what you're talking about. In the basic core, you need to have same thing except with a thesis. This one address all parts of the question for 2 points. You need to be doing that in every essay. You should know them. You could get 1 point if you address most parts of the question. Like if you only address the continuities and not the change, or only the changes and not the continuity, or just both points. You need those 2 points. You can get 2 points for a substantial thesis, and you use appropriate historical evidence, so you need to know what you're talking about. I'll say this again and again and again. You can get a point for using relevant world historical context effectively to explain the continuity and change over time. So you need to have your history right when explaining the continuities and changes. So what's it saying, what changed over time, and For another point, analyze why they stayed the same, why they changed. So here's some tips and tricks. It's easy to think about what has changed, but you need to think about what has stayed the same. Sometimes, like something in history stays the same, even though it appears that everything has changed. So history, it may look like everything's changing rapidly, but there's always something that stays the same. Whether the idea of monarchies or the elite, like someone being better than someone else, that's something that's always going to be staying the same. You need to have facts to support your thesis. Without it, your essay is doomed to be weak. Statements that are incorrect do not help your score, but they don't count against you in terms of losing core points. But you don't want to say the wrong information because then that just weakens you. You must think big. You need to focus on concepts, not only minuscule details. So this is where knowing the themes comes handy. If you understand why something changed, why something stayed the same, because of how we interact with the environment or cultural ideas, those themes that I mentioned in the first episode, you need to have them like ingrained in your brain because that tends to be helpful when writing this essay. And like I said, and will continue to say, you need to know why things changed and why things stay the same. If not, it sounds like another comparative essay, and you're gonna lose points. I must also explain how events in one area relate to the big picture, meaning you need to discuss the global context of the change and continuities. So, how, in the grand scheme of things, that simple change or thing that stayed the same affect everything else in the world. So, honestly, from my perspective, read the question several times so you understand what's being asked of you. You read it once, I guarantee you won't understand it. I had to read my prompt multiple times before I actually understood it. Even then, I still had issues where I jumped out of the time frame and something I'll discuss next. I also recommend you draw a timeline so it helps you place things and ideas that occur around a given time period. And I did this a lot. It does help. If you understand the time period, draw out a timeline, it makes placing things easier. It makes understanding what they're asking you a lot easier. Never, 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 never leave the time period given. I did that on my AP exam. That was one of my weaker essays. I was given the prompt where I had to analyze what was happening in the Mediterranean from 600 to 1200, I think. I don't even remember. Not even. I think it was like the older Mediterranean times. So with Athens and Greece. And I jumped out of that time period so many times. It wasn't good. I think that was one of my weaker essays compared to the other two. Because I talked about the Ottoman Empire, which wasn't for another 1,000 years. So I left my time period significantly. So that will hurt you. But never focus on only a change or a continuity. Focus on them both. Make it easy. Never include continuities that apply to only one part of the time span. Continuities need to be all around. Change needs to be all around. So here's a practice. Describe and analyze the continuities and changes in one of the following religions or belief systems from the beginning of the religion or belief systems up to 600 CE. So like they'll give you a list of belief systems. I didn't put them, I forgot when I was typing this up. But like they'll give you Hinduism or Buddhism and they'll give you a certain time frame that you stay with. So you pick one of them, mention how they stayed the same, how they changed from the beginning of when the religion started up until 600 CE. So if I you, when you're reading that prompt, highlight the time period. So that's beginning of the religion or belief system up to 600. That's when you highlight. You understand, analyze the continuity changes. You can highlight if you want, but you should know it. And the main thing to highlight is from the beginning of the religion or belief system up to 600 CE. That's kind of what you want to focus on. So in this case, we know what we need to focus on. So we know the time period, and you gotta stay within it. Don't try to leave it. If you get out of it, at least don't pass more than 30 or 40 years. If you're passing 100, max 100 or more, you're already screwing up. Okay, the essay format. You're gonna have your thesis. Then you're gonna have your first body paragraph. So you're gonna start talking about what's changed what stayed the same. You're going to talk about what's changed near the beginning date. Whether the change was slow or fast. You want to give evidence about that change. So give an example, a historical example. You want to analyze the process of the change. So what caused it to change? What was the later effects? How did these changes affect the next era? So questions you should be asking. And then compare it to a larger global context. So how does this affect the grand scheme of the time period? And then you're going to do the same thing. What I just mentioned there, you're going to apply it to your second paragraph, your third paragraph, and your first, second, and third should be, I think, changes. You have one that talks about the beginning, one that talks about the middle, and one that talks about the end. So set up like a historical time scene with the first three paragraphs and talk about changes. The fourth body paragraph, I would say, would be continuities. Leave the hardest one last. So you want to think about what stayed the same in a time period, or what caused it to stay the same, and compare it to the global scheme of things. And then your last paragraph, which is your conclusion, if you have enough time to write it, should kind of be like a regifting of your thesis. Summarize it again. These are things you need to remember. For a DBQ, always highlight what the question is asking and analyze the documents correctly. Group them into three and always have a point of view and additional document in each paragraph. When it comes to comparative, highlight what the question is asking you. You need to have a comparative and a contrast, and how many of each is up to you. And you need to know what you're talking about. Your CCOT, highlight what the question is asking. Know your history. Same thing with a comparative. Know your history. You need to know what has changed and what stayed the same. Stay in your time period, telling you from the words of the wise. You know, I've been through this. Stay in your time period. If not, it will hurt you. Understand and state why things have changed, why things have stayed the same. It's easy to say what changed, what stayed the same. If you say why, it makes your essay a lot better. And finally, for all three of these essays, address all parts of the question. If not, you will lose the major points. That's it. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. I'm more than glad to help. Subscribe, tell your friends about it, spread word. Follow at Twitter at AP World Guide so you can get tips and questions of the day, anything you need. And on the next video, I plan on covering time management and stress when it comes to this class so you know how to handle things. Bye, guys.